I like how I have
down here.
it's showing in here. Look at all my tabs. I have
Here,
open.
Nancy.
Whoa.
I said, one of my best lines covered there. I said, my disguise as an old fat guy has served me very well up till now.
I wish you could see my face right now. I dispute that. So, okay. I got us then. We are here we're streaming now. I'm gonna share my screen in a second. Okay. Let's see. So then, Christian, if you would keep admitting people as they come in, that would be great.
I gotcha.
Can you all see my screen okay on your end for everyone?
Yep.
Okay, give me 1 second here. So we can get started. Okay, I think I have, I'm gonna ask everyone, I'm gonna mute everybody, and when it's your time to speak, if you're on Zoom, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. So hang on, I'm gonna mute everybody. And then I'm going to pass it to John Seberg here in just a second. Let me switch my view here for you all so you can see John a little bit better. Does that work for you? Great. Okay. All righty. John, will you go ahead and kick us off? John, you're muted. This one is not my fault. There you go.
That is my fault.
Will we kick off?
Welcome, folks. Thanks for being with us tonight. On the screen in front of you, you should be seeing our agenda for the evening. It's very straightforward. The goal of it is to create an environment where people can share their thoughts. But before we get going, I'd appreciate Cheryl Southard's opening us up in prayer. Cheryl?
Okay. Credit for the prayer tonight goes to Kim Walker-Smith and St. Francis. If you'd please pray with me. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Where there's hatred, let us sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Cheryl. I don't want to take a lot of time because we want to save the bulk of the time for everybody's comments and questions and concerns. Next slide, please. But what we are, and if I can move my screen over like that, here's a summary of tonight. We are gathered to invite God's Spirit to guide us in hearing each other's thoughts regarding possibly changing our name. We'd like to meet for approximately 90 minutes. That's not a hard, rigid number. We'd ask that you please stay focused on our topic, which is weighing whether to change our name from Colonial Church. And as Sarah had said earlier, we'll be live streaming this session to YouTube, and it will be available for later viewing as well there and on our website. So what's the backstory? Why are we here? What's led up to this initiative to contemplate potentially changing our name? And I think it, without putting too fine a point on it, it boils down to a societal shift over the last 20 years or so towards a negative connotation to the word colonial and its different iterations. This perhaps resides with the Black community and the Indigenous community, and interestingly, some of the younger white population who have probably been taught history in a different way than what some of us older people have. And to summarize, to colonize includes occupying and exploiting groups of people and their land for economic gain. Obviously, the pandemic and George Floyd's death spurred on lay leadership to a summit that I called. And at that summit, we received feedback to encourage a name change consideration. With that, we raised the question at council. And in June, council voted on a motion and developed a task force. The task force is made up of a communication team. And the plan there is phase 1, an invitation to conversation. Phase 2, deeper discernment, leading up to a final phase of a congregational vote. We are holding these courtyard sessions and these town hall sessions as part of phase 2, a chance for people to share their concern, their angst, their emotions about keeping or changing our name, so that there can be a full airing on this topic. One quick, if you would go back, please, Sarah, just for a second. Phase 3, congregational vote. Notice has been given for a special church meeting on January 10th, 2021. And the key point here is that changing the name is a big deal, and the bylaws anticipate that. It's one of several areas where the bylaws say there needs to be at least a 60 days notice for anything considering changing the name of the church. Next, please. So here's the motion. I'm not going to read every word of this here. This is able to be found on the website, but our goal is to articulate the rationale behind the need for Colonial Church to change its name as we see that rationale, for people to agree or disagree with or add to, build a process for discussion as we're into it now, and then ultimately to develop a list of no more than 3 potential new names for the church. Next, please. And the fourth point, and there's been a change, there's been an amendment to that since when we first launched this motion at council. And that is that as described in Article 12 of the bylaws, we'll schedule a special church meeting for January 10th, 2021, where we'll discuss and ultimately vote on a change. And the key point here is that it does need to be a 2/3 majority or greater. And we have gone to a 2-step process rather than a 1-step process. And I want to just highlight that for a moment. That means that on January 10th, we won't be voting on what a new name would be. We're only going to be voting on whether or not we should change the name. And if we vote positively that we would change the name, then that will lead to a follow-up meeting where we will entertain commentary and select a new name, but that will be out at a later date than January 10th. Next, please. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our senior pastor, Jeff Lindsay.
Well, good evening.
Let me make sure.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening. Hi.
Hi.
Jeff Lindsay has left the
Oh, there we
building.
go.
Hi, are you there?
Can you all hear Jeff?
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for being willing to be with us tonight. And I don't know if they can see them, but the Halls are right here sitting with us. So we're glad to have them with us. Otherwise, we'd be lonely. I want to share a few things with you tonight. I want to back up before I go forward. Some of you are aware of the fact that I had put my name in the ring as a potential candidate to be the next senior minister of Colonial Church. When I suggested that, we put together a series of town hall meetings then, where I would have the opportunity to share a little bit about why I thought this would be the time for me to be chosen as the senior minister, and the vision that I would suggest going forward that would guide our church. If you came to one of those town hall meetings, you're going to hear again what I shared, but I think it's important for us to back up, to remember what we talked about as we thought about the change in leadership and thought about our future going forward. If you were at one of those town hall meetings, one of the things that you remember is I had chosen, or maybe it would chose me, Isaiah 43, a familiar passage, but it had powerful words about what it meant for me to put my name in the ring for leadership, but also about what it meant for Colonial going forward. It was this statement over and over and over in my heart and in my head that, behold, I am doing a new thing. That God was declaring to me that if I would be willing, and if the church saw it as the way forward, that God would do a new thing. Otherwise, there's no way I have the courage to put my name in the ring. No way I have the courage to say that I have all of what it was going to take to lead this church into the future. It's going to have to be a God thing. It's going to have to be God leading and guiding. It's going to have to be God speaking to our congregation. And it's going to have to be God gathering not only the members of this church, but also a new team of people that would join our staff and help lead us forward. If you've read Isaiah 43 recently, you know there's some pretty powerful statements in there. And in Isaiah 43, it says that Yahweh wants to make a way forward. That God is all about moving us forward, that there's a direction that we're going. There's a caution to not remember the former things, but really what it means is to not dwell there. It doesn't mean don't remember them. It just remembers don't stay stuck there. Why? Because I want to do something new. I want to change the direction of the way that brings life and hope and possibility. Why? Not so this church gets all the credit, not so that everyone thinks that we're great, but that God gets the praise. God gets the glory. That passage guided me, gave me the courage to say, if this church will be willing to pick me as the next senior minister, I will serve faithfully. I will gather around me not only smart people to join our staff, but I will gather around us the lay folks that will invest their time, energy, resources, hope, dreams for the future. Well, I said that in February, and you voted in March, and then what happened? The pandemic. 2 months after that, George Floyd dies in the streets of Minneapolis. Two things that we could not have seen coming. We pivoted, we moved, we said getting worship online, going all online for our classes, trying to mobilize our youth and children and family ministries, mostly using Zoom, but also using this beautiful campus. We created many opportunities for people to be together and to enjoy the reality of what it means to be a part of this community. And we did many of those things, and it's been amazing. But the whole purpose of this, the whole idea of where we are today, was not so that I could throw a wrench in that, was not so that I could say, yeah, I have this big, strong ego, I'm going to throw out these ideas, we're going to lead the church in some other way than where God wants us to lead us. But the way we got here is that we believe that God led us here. The lay leadership, the staff of your church believes that this is where we lead. Why? Why? Threefold. One, because the church has been accused for generations of being tone deaf to the realities of the world around them. We thought, let's not be tone deaf anymore. Let's be the church that God calls us to be, and let's respond to our neighbors. Let's be the church that we have been, we long to be, and continue to desire to be. Let's be that church. So let's not be tone deaf to the reality of what's happening right out our back door. The second idea was, if we were going to move forward, many of you who are on this call tonight are longtime members of this church. Some are newer, so this is history for you. But we have seen the decline of this church over 15 years. We have been concerned about the future of the church for a long time. And the reality was that if we were going to move forward, if there was going to be a hope, it was going to take us humbling ourselves, submitting to the leadership of God and the leading of God's Spirit, in such a way that we could create a hope going forward. And then lastly, if not to care for the world, if not to take a hard look at ourselves, let's choose a name that's going to reinvigorate this congregation. Let's choose a name that's going to be a lot closer to the vision currently than maybe it historically has been. Trust me, when I showed up here 36 years ago, I was proud to say that I was a colonial minister. I loved it. We were a pilgrim people on a journey together, and that made so much sense with the leadership that was there and the vision that was going. We haven't talked about that for 20 years. We haven't called ourselves that for 20 years. Maybe it's time for us to ask ourselves, what is our vision going forward? And could we choose a name? Could God lead us to a new name that would motivate us, encourage us, empower us, direct us to how we can better serve each other and serve the world? That's how we got here. There's a notion out there with some folks that somehow we're trying to thwart the future of this church, that somehow we are not listening well, we don't care. I promise you, that's not true. I weep for the future of this church. I care about this church. That's why we're working so hard to get the right people on staff, to really empower the lay leadership of this church so that we can empower the greater part of this church to do what God calls us to do. Well, what is that? What are those things that I believe that God is calling us to? What are the things that I'm committed to as the senior pastor of this church? And trust me, I'm still getting used to that name. I'm still getting used to that name. I feel like there's a lot of big shoes that I'm trying to walk around in. But if you came to my town hall meetings, one of the words, or the little words that I used was I kept saying through the reforming process that we were kind of in lots of words kind of place in the life of this church. I picked up on that and I thought that's really what's going to help us to move forward. That can really direct us in the places that God wants to lead us. And so I said at those town hall meetings, I said that we need to reform and realign. We need to reform ourselves around those core values that really sounded, if you've been around for a while, a lot like how we've lived out our lives in the past, but recommitting with a new energy to reform ourselves around those 5 core values. And then realign ourselves with staffing, with new visions and new missions going forward. It's why we have the great staff that we have, and we're still filling in those spots that we need. Why we have asked people to come and help us with missions and confirmation and youth and children and families and classes and theology. And we have a powerful team, but that's us reforming and realigning. Why? For the future, for those who are here and for those who will come. I really felt strong that we needed to restore a clear sense of purpose. I felt like we really were kind of on automatic pilot for a while, to some degree, kind of waiting for it all to come crashing down. That the last person who's here turn off the lights. That's not a good way for us to operate as the church. That's not us being faithful to God who says, I'm continuing to do a new thing. Paul says, I'm carrying you on to completion. That means we're running the race. And so we kind of got to get jogging again. We've got to restore our purpose and our direction. Who are we? Why are we here on this corner and this time? Why are we here? And where are we going to go? And who are we going to reach out to? I'd also tell you that evangelism hasn't been a word that we've used a lot in the life of this church, at least at the time that I was, even though a part of my job description at one time was evangelism. But one of the things that we need to do is to begin to think about ourselves as this boat that's on a journey, headed somewhere. And there's people that want to go the same direction. We need to let them on board. But there's people that are in the water too, for lots of reasons. We got to reach out a hand, and we got to bring them on board. We've got a team of people in the life of this church right now that are committed to being that boat on a journey to a distant shore where God's going to lead us, and we're going to bring as many people along with us as we possibly can to restore that vitality that we have had in the life of this church before. We're going to revitalize, and we're going to re-enliven. We're going to re-equip and re-challenge and re-encourage the lady of this church. I told you when I was at town hall meetings, I said, the only reason why I'm throwing, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons why I'm throwing my name in this ring is because We don't have the time to go do a national search. We don't have the time to get that person up and running. We don't have the time. Why? Because we have an amazing legacy part of our membership. We have this wonderful senior membership of our church. We've got to re-engage you. We got to reconnect you to the life of the church. We don't have a lot of middle ground. We don't have a lot of 35 to 55-year-olds, but we've got this emerging group of families and young people. So we got this wonderful group that has been around and done it and been there. And we got this other group that is saying, I want to be a part of that community. How can we merge those two things? How can we merge those two groups? How can we unite around something new that's going to empower and engage all of us? And then how can we begin to revitalize our community, to re-enliven ourselves around the purpose of what it means to be a community of faith? And then we got to redeploy. We got to get out there. We gotta follow our vision. We gotta do the work. We gotta live the call, is what I was telling you. And I still believe that. You know, the reason why churches grow is because the membership are excited about what's happening. That's how it grows. You can get great staff, and we've got that. We can have great programs. We have that. But it's going to be the invitation of people who are having the experiences that are changing their lives, and they want their friends and families to be a part of it. So we need to re-engage this congregation. We need to redeploy. And the way that happens is if we will reimagine ourselves. Reimagine ourselves. Standing firmly on a history that has been filled with great ministry. Lives changed and transformed. Standing firmly on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. And reimagining, just as they did in past generations. How will we create programs? How will we be invitational? How will we get out there? Not for us, but for the world. For the world that Jesus went to the cross and died for. We've got the greatest message history's ever known. And unless we gather together, unite around a common purpose and a common vision, supporting the lay leadership and the staff of this church, I don't know. I'm an optimistic, glass half full, can do, try and outwork me guy. But I can't do it by myself. And none of us can. And so what we need to do, I believe, and that's the right reason why we're here tonight, is for us to have some dialogue around this issue of a name change. That's just the start. It's not going to solve every problem. It's not going to throw the doors wide open. It's going to change the way people see us from the very beginning of our relationship. It's going to change our heart. It's going to bring us, I hope, collectively to our knees and say, God, lead us and guide us. Use us for your great purposes. And then we're going to have a name that's going to lead us and guide us into the future. That's my hope. That's what gets me out of bed every single day. That and my absolute love for all of you. I love Colonial Church. I love this gathering community, and I want us to have a future going forward. And so that's why we're here tonight, to have this conversation, to tell you what's on our hearts and minds, to share that cooperatively. And then what we're going to do, why? Because we're good Congregationalists. We're going to listen to each other. We're going to think about that and ponder that. We're going to pray. We're going to open our Bibles. We're going to discern together. We're going to vote. And the outcome of that vote will guide us going forward. Because that's what we do. We're Congregationalists. We're not circumventing who we've been. We're not changing the direction. We're not skipping any steps. We're being the church that we've always been, in the congregational polity that we've always been led by. And the hope is that gathering together, God will use us going forward. So, those are my thoughts for Canada tonight.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing. And Cheryl is now going to share with us just a little bit about where we will be going from here in terms of looking forward to January 10th. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to unpin us. And then Cheryl, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and go ahead.
That's not Cheryl.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so the vote will be on January 10th. The plan is to send paper ballots to everybody on the membership list the second week of December. So for those that travel for the holidays or are lucky enough to go to warmer climes, that you will have your ballot before you go. There will be an opportunity that if you need to change addresses or whatever, that you can send that address into the office. Everybody will have their ballot in hand, but you're not going to do anything with it because, as Jeff said, we're a congregational church and we need to discern this together. So the congregational meeting on January 10th will be, God willing, if we can, we'll get as many people into the meeting house as possible. If COVID says no, then we'll all be on the Zoom meeting together, where we will discern the question that is before us. After we've listened to what the Spirit has said to our hearts, then you will cast your ballot and mail it back to the church. We'll be giving somewhere between 10 and 14 days for that to be received at the church, at which time it will be tallied, and then we'll be able to give the results to everyone. So it's a little bit different than it was with our annual meeting last time around, where everybody voted ahead of time. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that we've got the opportunity for everybody to gather one last time to discuss this, and then you'll be asked to cast your ballots. So that's where that is. There will be plenty of communication on how this will be done, how to get on Zoom, how to call in on the phone if you don't have Zoom, to submit questions if you need to, things like that. So watch for that. That'll be coming in the next couple of weeks, but that's where we stand with the voting process right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And then where we will go next that's me. If you can't tell between all of my many masks and all of the things right now. Just a little bit tonight is a little bit different. Obviously here in person, we switched to the Hearth Room because we realized that our in-person registrations, given the rising COVID numbers and everything, were so small, we moved into this space tonight. So it's Jeff and the Halls and myself in this space, and then all of you wonderful folks are on Zoom. And so how we'll be doing this tonight, what I would ask is that if you would like to offer a comment, if you would just send a chat, you can either send it to everyone or just to me, and indicate if you have a comment or a question that you would like to offer as we move into the time of true town hall fashion, where we together, what we want to do in this space is through hearing what's been bubbling up in each of us, that we seek to hear God's Spirit. And that's one of the beautiful things from my perspective about congregationalism, is we both bring our hearts, our minds, and our journeys with Christ into the space, but then we listen for the Spirit collectively in our midst so that we might discern together. And so in view of that, one of the things that as we were having some conversation, we wanted to be intentional about tonight is after each person shares, we want to take about 10 seconds to just pause, and all of us collectively to take a breath to invite God's Spirit to just discern within our own selves if there might be a new perspective we heard from that particular person. We'll just pause, and then after that, we'll go on to the next person. So given that the Halls are the only ones here in this space, and then for you all on Zoom, again, if you would just indicate that you would like to offer a comment or a question. If you have a comment or question you want me to read on your behalf, you can type it out, and I can also do that. The thing that we just ask, given that we want to make sure that there's space enough for everyone, is we'll start off with about 2 minutes. I'll give you a kind of heads up when you've gotten to 2, and then if you go on to 3, that's fine. But once you get to 3, we will ask you to wrap up. You can get back in the queue to speak again if you'd like to. But again, we want to just make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share it so we can hear from one another. And in so doing, hear any new invitations that God might have for us. And if we only have a few folks who want to comment and someone is very verbose in wanting to comment, then you will have more space to comment. And so I think within that, again, you already know that we're streaming on YouTube. And I don't think that there's, if you do have a particular question, like say you really want to hear something particularly from Jeff or from John or Cheryl, you can indicate that. Otherwise, your comment will go as it stands. You know, you can just say your comment. with that, I think I'm going to stop the share of my screen. So then that way you all are just front and center here. And if you would like to offer comment, please indicate that by chatting to me in the chat box. That's the little thing that looks like a cartoon thought bubble that's on your Zoom. So you can indicate that there and I will put you in the queue to do that. Please go ahead and indicate that at any point. And Christian, you should have had a kind of alert that popped on your screen where he said, here's the chat.
Sarah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I don't
Is
know
that
how
Nancy
to do that.
Danielson?
Yes, I don't know how to do that. So,
Okay, got it, Nancy. We'll go to you. So
okay, thank you.
Nancy Danielson, go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay, I've been a member of Colonial Church since 1981. I am the head of the finance committee this year. I reached out to Jeff and John earlier this week, and I was really struck by the last town hall meeting about the gentleman who had been a member for many, many years and talked about moving the church from Wooddale over to Tracy, and how the vote took 3 votes. And they wanted to get, Arthur said 51% isn't good enough. And I guess my comment is that I am not part of that email string with older members, but there's an email string going around where they're really concerned about how fast this all happened. And I just heard from Cheryl, this is happening on January 10th. My plea to John and Jeff earlier this week was, can we please let this go on a little bit longer? That was the plea from the older members, people that have been around for a long time, that support this church financially, but not just financially, but they volunteer, they've been on committees. And I don't feel like their words are being heard to, and my word either, that we don't want this to happen so quickly. It seemed to come on so quickly. And I would just ask that everybody consider not that we not vote on the name change, but let's wait 3 or 4 or 5 months. Everybody wants to do this on January 10th, but the older members really want to wait longer. I was kind of struck by what I read on the email that came out on Wednesday. I really applaud you for giving plus and minuses to the name change. But I'm really concerned about people leaving the church because they feel like they haven't been heard. These are people that have been members for a long time, and they've been here for a long time. And Jeff, to all due respect, I feel like you're trying to make the pitch tonight that you're listening to us, but I'm not sure that everybody feels that way. So I think if you wait 3 or 4 or 5 months and let the conversation continue, and that you then take the vote, I think that people will feel like they've really been listened to. I'm not necessarily saying I'm not going to vote for the name change, or I would, but I really ask everybody to really seriously consider, let's delay it for 3 or 4 or 5 months. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Nancy. Let's pause now for 10, 15 seconds and just take a breath and invite God's Spirit to continue to be present with us. All right, thank you. Is there someone else who maybe also is struggling to find the chat who would like to offer any comment? If so, you can also just indicate, and if multiples of you speak at the same time, we'll know that we can start an official line then. Oh, I do see it. Actually, there is a chat here. I will just read the comment unless Greg or Linda, you want to say it on your own. I will read it. Greg Meelan and Linda Rich Meelan noted that name change. It's been on the table for 4 years or more, is their comment. Is there anyone who'd like to offer a comment or perspective or question at this point?
I will, Sarah.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead. Let me just I'm gonna get this closer to you.
okay. It's just a quick question this time. I just wonder if Greg and Linda would be willing just to give us a little history of how it's been brought before the church. I know I've heard some things, but maybe that would be helpful for others as well.
It started, Daniel Harrell brought it up in a sermon one time when he came back from a sabbatical. That's the first time I heard it. It was quite a while back. And I know it was part of the reforming process. It was one of the issues in the reforming process. We should be done waiting by now. And if all we can do is attack the process. I got to hear some really good comments about why we should not change the name rather than just attack the process.
Thank you, Greg. Let's pause for a minute again and take a breath and listen for the Spirit.
Jerry Hall is pro-name.
All right, is there someone who would like to go next in offering a comment, a perspective, or a question?
I think I see Lorelai's hand up.
Oh, okay, let's see. Sorry, I will just, oh, there we go. Lorelai, can you unmute yourself? You are muted right now. That's probably why I was not hearing you. There you go. All right, give me 1 second and I'll get you, there we go. All right, go ahead, Lorelai.
Okay, since one of my emails was in this thing today or this week, I feel like I should probably add to that. For the first thing is that I was on the reforming committee and went to probably every meeting there was, and we never, as a group, ever talked about changing the name of the church.
Never.
The only time I ever heard it was a sermon that you referred to, Greg, that Daniel said something about that was suggested to him. You know, you remember the sermon that somebody came up to him and said, I don't know how you could even call yourself colonial, that's so bad, blah, blah, blah. So it was the first time I really ever heard about it. Never heard about it again, except in maybe some casual conversation with someone, a friend or something, and it never really got anywhere. So this might have been in other groups of people talking about it, but it wasn't in the people that we knew. So when we got this whole thing in September with the letter that said, we have voted to change the name and here's why we're going to do it. And you can just listen to us, basically is what you said. Yeah, that was a shock to an awful lot of people. And other people who are not around the church a whole lot, but are members said, where does this ever come through? We have people, every once in a while, someone will say from another church, I hear you changing this name. What on earth is this all about? I mean, it's just sort of gone around, you know, kind of people think we're pretty much nuts. But anyway, I myself, I kind of don't care if you change it or not. I don't like it, but I don't care. But I'm on the thing with the colonial stuff. That's the reason why we ever thought about colonial, is because it was the Pilgrims and the whole thing. Never thought about colonialism ever. And so whenever you say that to anybody, they say the same thing. I've never thought about that. So anyway, but this could have gone so much easier and so much better if it had come along and said, hey, I think maybe we should talk about this and get you together and see what you have to say, rather than saying, we're changing the name and this is why we're doing it. Because that's how it's coming to all of us. Also, if you have not been around this church for 40 or 50 years, this church has been through so many traumas that it's kind of, oh no, here comes another one, and I don't know if I can handle another one. This is kind of when I came to the end of this email, I said, I don't know if this might be the thing that broke the camel's back for me, because I'm sort of done with it. But we've had, before we even got into this church in the 60s, there was this great big thing that divided the church like crazy, with people running around signing petitions to going against each other, fighting all over the place because of joining one of the denominations. We had trouble with things that Arthur liked to do or didn't want to do. We'd get mad about the cross in the meeting house. I remember we got mad with that. We had Westfall. We had a horrible, horrible meeting with the Westfall thing that really tore more people apart from the church. There's just been too many. So you land this one too, and it's pretty much the end for a lot of people. That and the generalized that we all know that the church has been having trouble for the last 25 years for a whole lot of reasons. And, I'm not going to blame anybody or anything, but there's just a lot of reasons why things have just gone down the tube. And that is why I think most people now are really upset. If you got together those older people and said, hey, these are the ideas, and then say, well, maybe that's okay, it's all right. And then also rushing onto it and saying, we're doing it in January. Too bad, we got to hurry up because the momentum is here now. Boy, we got to get it because people they got to come here and they won't come to this church because it's called Colonial. It's getting bad, and it's getting contentious, and people are getting mad at each other. And this is something that shouldn't be happening. I think the devil is having a wonderful time with us, and we're losing the battle. We really are. So that is all I really have to say.
Thank you, Lorelei. Let's pause now for a moment and breathe and invite God's Spirit.
You comment?
All right. Thank you. I did have a comment here from Mary Scott. Just noting that she had lost track. When was this question first raised with the entire congregation? It seems several months ago now. The first communication came out via the video at the end of July was when, so council, John, I don't know if you want to speak more to the timing or timeline at all. I'm going to give him John Seberg.
Okay, here we go. So the question of when was this first raised with the entire congregation?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Mary Scott, I think it has been several months now, if not longer. There is talk about how we've actually been engaged on this from the very beginning of the COVID epidemic. So if you wanted to go back to a March timeframe, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, I guess you're talking about 7 months right about now that this has been being kicked around. And I think that even before that, I think that, things are in the eye of the beholder, of course. And Lorelei, I mean you no disrespect. You and I were on the visioning team together. I sat in meetings where Jim Silburn raised quite definitely that we should consider changing the name of the church. Now, it came in the backdrop of a consulting arrangement that was kind of petering out, but to say that that wasn't raised as something for the visioning team to consider is, well, it just definitely was. People like Greg Meeland and Linda have been quite vocal about this, coming from their perspectives, and much appreciated some of the learnings that they've brought forward on what does the name Colonial mean. to people of different perspectives than white people. I think there's been a lot of nuances out there. And I think we need all to be very prayerful about this, about what does this name mean to our personal faith walks and to what people outside the church think about us. And let's be clear. I mean, slavery started in the colonies. That's where it started in this country. Now, I'm not really interested in colonialism as an argument as much as I am the word colonial, because that's where slavery started in the United States. So if that is not, that needs to be acknowledged, because if we're going to talk about people of color and Native Americans, indigenous people, and ask them what do they think of the name, they're going to say, that's your problem, colonial. That's not my problem, that's your problem. So it really needs to come down to our own individual hearts. And is this name the right name for us going forward? So I'm sorry, I'm not a preacher. There's people on this call with much better theological credentials than myself that can speak to the theological aspects of this. But I think we've had a lot of time to dwell on this topic. I think that it's not, an extra 3 months is not going to educate anybody all that much further. I think the Holy Spirit needs to move through all of us, needs to challenge us in terms of what's best for this church going forward. And that has to do with are our hearts softened and our minds sharpened, and are we able to really ask what is going to help this congregation and this church thrive over the next 75 years? I'll stop preaching.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Let's pause for a moment and take a breath, inviting God's Spirit to speak into each of our hearts. I will just note that I have 2 comments. One is from Mary Scott. She just noted, I wonder if I got the same communication as everyone else. I never got the impression that the council was ordering us to change the name. And then I'll go to Jody Powell. Jody, can you unmute yourself? And then you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, everyone. What I was going to say is that when I came to the church 13 years ago, I would have never come to Colonial if my husband didn't grow up in the church. And so if somebody said, or if I was driving past and I looked and I saw, oh, Colonial Church, I would have just passed it by. So because of Mark, he was like, can we go to the church that I grew up in? And I would have, if I just went by the name, I would have never known how special and lovely and welcoming everybody in the congregation is, and how beautiful a church it is just by the name. And honestly, I didn't think of colonialism until this summer. And before, I hate to say this, but when, I said colonial, I was thinking it means old. And, that probably would have been something if I, didn't meet Mark, that I'd have been like, oh, no, I'm not even going to try that church out. So going forward, if we want to be a church that's welcoming of all people, and I don't know the exact words what I want to say, but to draw other people in from different ethnic backgrounds, from different age groups, I think it's in the best interest. And yes, people do think colonialism, slavery, bad. And so it's, weighed heavy on my heart these past few months. No matter what people's decisions are or their thoughts, I still, appreciate everyone and their opinions. And and I totally appreciate the people who have been in the church for 45, 50 plus years. That is amazing. And I know a lot of them and such wonderful people. But as people grow older, we do need younger people to come in to support the church, because once the older generation, has moved on to your home in heaven or whatnot, it's where are we going to get the funds from? Yes, I know that that's been a big, huge blessing to the church, but there has to be other people coming into the church. So
Thank you, Jody.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, let's take a pause and just listen for God's Spirit. Thank you again. Is there someone else who would like to, Roy? Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself, Roy. I can't unmute you. This is a familiar look. I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could help.
Bottom left corner.
There, am I muted?
There we go. Yay. Go ahead, Roy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. I wasn't going to say anything. And as I've sat here and listened to this, and as I thought about this, my wife and I, my late wife and I were married, we're members for over 45 years. Our 3 kids came through Colonial. Our oldest daughter played the piano for the youth choir. Our kids were very active in Camp Pyro. So it's been a wonderful church home. The name is not the big thing to me. However, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the process, and I'm concerned about all the different things. Lorelei referred to them, all the different things that have gone on. And then I look at the timing of this when it came out. I frankly had not been there present when Daniel had talked about the name. The name has never been a concern to me. The name, I thought it was very nice. It was about the colonies and the pilgrims getting together with the Indians for Thanksgiving, and kind of a look at that from the point of view of people getting together and Thanksgiving services and the wonderful things that the church had done in the community. And I look back at the Koinonia groups and the Curcio and the various things, and it's been a very meaningful place for us to be. What I would submit, and it's somewhat along the line of what Lorelei talked about, is I think that to rush this, what you run the risk of doing, I would submit, is creating some problems that really could be avoided by allowing it to simmer a little bit. And by that, I mean, when this came out, when I first really heard about it, and I admit maybe I don't read everything, but when it came out, the pandemic had started, and now we have the pandemic. People are concerned about the disease, of course, the virus. They're concerned about their children at school or their families, wherever they might be, or their grandchildren. How do they get together? What do they do? How can they visit them? They're concerned about those real life things, their jobs, the economy, where we're going to go. And to me, I would submit that at this particular time, I think it's a idea that needs to simmer somewhat. I think it needs to cook a little bit. I think it needs to not be rushed, because I think if you don't rush it, if you allow it to kind of go back and forth, it would be much better accepted by the older people. Now you can say, well, the newer members look at it as slavery and this sort of thing. I'll be honest, that's never the way I looked at it. But I'm not one to get into great semantics, but I would submit that it would be good if we could keep people looking at this in a positive way. We have church leadership that would like to do that. I understand that. They feel it's one of those things that would help them grow the church, have people come together. But what doesn't help us is to have something that's boiling out there that is kind of causes consternation. When this first came up, whenever that was, whatever the date was, we were under the pandemic. We were into virtual church services. There were no coffees between church services. There were not the opportunities to gather and just talk. And then maybe after we talked to go out to eat or whatever it would be on a Sunday morning or between services. So I don't think it's been a healthy opportunity for people to discuss things in a way that would be positive and thoughtful and kind and caring. And by attempting to move this quickly.
I'll just ask you to start to move in the next like 30 seconds towards.
Well, let me finish, please. I feel I should be entitled to have a couple more comments here. With all due respect, I think that there's an opportunity here for us to move in one of two directions. One, if we move too quickly, we can create problems going forward. If we step back, be caring and thoughtful and kind, and maybe say, okay, let's back up a little bit and look at it in that fashion, I think we would profit more from that than trying to rush into it. So I would just suggest that that you throw this out for consideration and thoughts and prayers, because I think that's the most important thing, that we stay together as a church family and not do something that's going to cause consternation and people sending emails back and forth that are not necessarily easily digested and understood. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roy. I'll ask us again to just pause for a moment and listen for the Spirit's invitations. The waiting queue I have then is Nan Bertelson and Leah Appleton. So Nan, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nan Bertelson. I was baptized at Colonial in 1959 when I was born, and I've been there for a good portion of my life. I just want to say, to me, the church is the people. I don't care what the name is. I kind of would echo Roy's, just the sensitivity to not upsetting people and people leaving or whatnot. So to me, it's more important to have a congregation stay together. And I guess another thing I'd like to look at is who in particular are we trying to bring in? What people, in what ways? I don't know that just a name change is going to do that. Although I am in favor of a name change. But I think we need to look at what else. If we're looking at trying to bring younger people in, we need to do more than change a name. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Nan. Let's just pause and take a breath and invite the Spirit before we go to Leah. Thank you again. Leah, I don't see where you are, so unmute yourself.
I got it.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to probably meet some of you for the first time, if I haven't got to meet you yet. I joined Colonial staff just before lockdown kind of hit and pandemic, so it's been a journey, to say the least, to work with the youth team, but also awesome. So just wanted to do a quick intro, but I would just like to first and foremost acknowledge I hear the voices of the trauma that's happened throughout the years. I hear the voices of the fear of losing people internally. And I think that's real. And I also would like to acknowledge that my fear is losing people externally. And I think, you know, there's things to weigh on both sides, but as a new person working here, trying to invite younger people or even people in my life that I know are kind of the spiritual refugee people right now. They don't have a home. They don't know what they're looking for. It becomes an obstacle when I have to say our name. And so my fear is that people don't get to experience this community that I have that is so welcoming. The value welcome beloved, I think, is one of the most beautiful things this church could uphold. And so my fear is people not experiencing that, because it is so important. And I would just love for us to consider that obstacle too, and think about losing people in that way, and the trauma that they might carry from hearing this name or feel from it. And so I think I just want to acknowledge, I hear it internally. I totally understand that. And I see it externally as well.
Thank you, Leah. Let's again take a moment and pause. Okay, I have 3 comments in the chat that I will read successively, and then we'll go to our next request for comments or to share their comment. So the 3 comments in the chat that I've seen, this one from Greg and Linda: if anyone has a good reason to not change the name, can we hear that rather than attacks on process and those who have designed the process? From Michelle Steinke: I think Jeff clearly addressed the reasons for the name change, racism, and the potential benefits of choosing a name to live into a vision of our core values. Change is hard, but it's the right thing to do to say we are listening to people of color. It's not about bringing new people in as much as it's a response to the hurt in the world. And the 3rd comment here is from Jackie Carlson: I totally agree with Lorelei and Roy, and I've been speaking against the name change, and in particular, the distaste for the reasons. Although there had been discussions of this in meetings for the last couple of years, it was never public. My original long statement was also printed in Wednesday's email, and I said my piece at the last town meeting. I also feel this should wait and simmer a while so we can be in the church building when this is taken up, and many members will be gone in January. Those are the 3 comments in the chats. With that, I'll go to Jen Turner. Jen, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm Jen, and I've been with Colonial since 2008, 2009, and I joined because I wanted to find a church that I could bring friends to, because I just have a heart to always see how God's speaking on other people's lives. And the kind of people that I have in my life are not your typical, like, I guess, your average Colonial member. But I have found a lot of Joseph. I've found a lot of love at Colonial Church, and I found a lot of acceptance and a lot of welcome. And it is a place where I've brought many different friends of different faiths, and would love to continue to do that. I just think that the name Colonial is a misrepresentation, like a significant, like just severe misrepresentation of the welcome and the spirit of love and the community that we have at Colonial. And I think that I feel the empathy for those who are concerned about losing their friends, over this transition and over the process and just over change, because it's hard. But I also, I've been thinking about like how we've been trying to educate ourselves and just try to figure out how to solve problems of systemic racism. And it goes even beyond like the head knowledge of like understanding colonialism. But like, I've just was thinking about like the movie Amistad, like the first time I actually like really understood what Joseph, please don't, what colonialism was about and about what slavery was about and the suffering that people experienced and the gore that's associated with slavery. Joseph, please sit down. I have a very excited son.
Hi, Joseph.
There's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of, obviously the knee on the neck of George Floyd. Like, what doesn't get our hearts about that? And so it is very, it is a place where I feel a lot of love. And I've actually seen a lot of friends that have left the church for different reasons as well in my age category. And I think I'm committed to this church, and I'm committed to our community. And so whether or not you change the name is not going to affect my commitment and my love for the people of this church. I'm grateful to have served on the HR committee for 5 years, and I know that I've been pretty invisible, but I plan to be involved as much as I can be. And it's my hope that we would understand just how tragic and how hurt people are about, being invisible and being, feeling like they're on the margins, and that they're, just the name itself is just a misrepresentation of the love that we have for one another here. And I just don't want that to be a barrier for anybody to jump on our boat and go forward with us. That's my final comment.
Thank you for sharing, Jen. Thanks for sharing. I have two waiting, then I have Bob Neal and then the Halls. So let's just take a pause and again, listen to God's Spirit together.
Are you going to talk?
All right, thank you. Let's go now then to Bob Neal. Go ahead, Bob Neal.
Okay, well, the Neal family has been a part of Colonial for 49 years. And we were a Pilgrim family. We were involved in the traditions. Things have changed a lot since we joined the church, nationally and worldwide, and the focus is different. We have a different society now who is looking at a lot of traditions as not necessarily good. Young people have moved away from the organized church and into large mega churches for that reason. And I'm 82 years old and I'm not going to be around here that long. And I certainly don't think that the church is about me. This is God's church, and I want it to continue. I have stuck around because of the people and for many reasons that I won't go into. My 3 kids were married there, and I'd like to see it go forward. And so I think that unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the issue is before us in the news and that perhaps the name is derogatory to someone who's flipping through, looking at new churches, or who is opposed to situations where it's ultra organized. And so if that's the case, then perhaps I'm open to whatever would make the church go forward. And so I am wondering too, how much the study has gone into the mechanics of this situation as far as how significant people have written about this affecting a church, and how much we have done to reach out to the silent people who perhaps don't attend church that much or are not that involved, because we want everyone to weigh in. And then the last comment I have is obviously to try to do a major, perhaps the most significant thing in the life of our church in the middle of a pandemic is not too smart. And how do we bring people together? Zoom is foreign to a lot of people. You can't get that many people on. We can't have large gathering meetings. This is a good idea. And this is the first town hall meeting I've been a part of. So I think I agree with, we need to put this off until we are in a better situation, and get a lot of opinions and a lot of people involved, not just the emails that are going around to a small number of people. Do you have any comments? My wife is here, but she is silent. Thank you.
Hi, Barb.
Hi. Hi,
Hi,
Barb.
Barb is right here.
Thank you. All right, let's pause for
She's
a
on
moment.
Zoom and I'm live, so.
Let's pause for a moment then.
She's on Zoom.
All right, Halls, I think if you both say something, the camera will turn towards you.
Okay, camera. Hello, hello.
Hi.
R2D2, come in. Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Jeff.
Here we are. Okay.
Okay, it worked.
So we lived in 3 former British colonies in Africa for 18 years. So
Hey, Sarah. I think they went on mute.
Yeah, I think they got muted.
Or it shows a little mute sign. We can't hear.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hang on one second. I think I'm just gonna do this for right now. I think this will. Sometimes technology is smarter than I am. There you go.
Thanks, Sarah.
So we got married in 1970, 67. And a year and a half later, 2 years later, we were in Kenya. We were on the airplane going into Nairobi, and I looked out the window and I said, honey, there's a giraffe out there. And at that moment, she was fishing around in the pocket of the seat in front of her for a barf bag. She was 8 months pregnant when we got there. So we realized that we didn't need to do a lot of talking. The focus was on helping university students at the University of Nairobi to understand Jesus and the gospel and discipleship. But we took Swahili, so we learned Swahili, and that was good. And we felt like that was the language, the trade language of Kenya, and it was needful for us to learn a language. Kikuyu was too complicated. So we did that and started to relate to the university students and understand the culture in terms of what impact colonialism has had on Kenyans. And we realized that they were quite subdued at that time. I think they've changed since then. And we felt like they were afraid of developing a lifestyle that would be appropriate in terms of walking with Jesus in light of their colonial history. And, you know, the British government had given land, tribal land, to officers in the British Empire who were needing to be rewarded for their faithfulness as soldiers. So they'd give them 20,000 acre ranches in the beautiful lands of Kenya. Wow. Taking away the property of the people, of the tribal people. So we were learning a lot, and then we realized that they were spiritistic. So I took courses at the University of Nairobi to help us understand the spiritism that was going on all during the colonial times and before. That was a piece of something that we needed to understand because that was their worldview. So then we spent 2.5 years in Kenya, went over to Uganda. Idi Amin was killing people, and we were trying to focus in on the university in Kampala, capital city. And we learned that the colonial powers weren't as severe in Uganda in terms of taking property. So the Ugandans were more secure. Then we went over to, it lasted a year, it was just too dangerous for us to stay there. We went on to Ghana after a year in Uganda and realized, hey, these people are different. The British government didn't really get established very deeply into Ghana with their colony because it was too dangerous in terms of diseases, dysentery, hepatitis, all of that. And they left the tribal units, structures of the tribal units intact. They didn't disrupt the historical identity ethnically of the Ugandans. And they were free. They would tell us if they're angry, well, the Kenyans wouldn't do that. So they were liberated, really. They weren't even hooked on the colonial powers. They were free. So we felt like, wow, they have accepted the parts of the colonial government of Britain, the good parts, and they've thrown away the bad parts. They were totally refreshing compared to the Kenyans and the Ugandans. So we've seen the good points of colonialism in terms of bringing education and medical and business and that sort of thing.
And missions.
The French didn't do as good a job, and the other colonies from other countries didn't do as good a job as the British. So that's a little background in terms of our understanding of colonialism, the goods and the bads.
Did you want to add, or, because he took about just over about 3.5 minutes. So if you
Okay.
wanted to say a few words, you could, because you're two people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When we had been in Kenya for a little while and studied Swahili, I went down to Nairobi and found a little old bookstore and bought a little booklet that talked about, people who could learn kitchen Swahili, women who wanted to learn how to be able to speak in the markets, etc. And so I brought it home and began to look at it. And the phrase that took my breath away was, "Don't put it there, stupid, set it here." And we began to see the underbelly of what colonialism had done. And of course, there were great things that happened through the expansion of the gospel, the spreading of education and so on. But there were also really horrible things. And so when we, I don't think that masses of people are going to come to our home here, our church, because we change a name. The phrase, "A rose by any other name smells the same." At the same time, names are hugely significant in the scriptures. There were 6 babies that were named by God before their birth, only 6. The last one was Emmanuel, with us, God. And I think that my huge concern is that we don't grieve the Spirit. God with us. How do we approach each other and this issue, remembering that it doesn't really belong to us? It really belongs to God. He's the namer. So I think too of God naming Abraham. He was Abram, exalted father. He became Abraham, father of many nations. Not one people can hang on to God. He breaks out. And I just want us to remain. I remember Joannie when we first came back from Ghana, and in '87 with our 5 kids, 3 of them had been born in Africa, and we were looking for a church home. And I remember standing out in the lobby in Colonial, one of the first Sundays we attended, and I felt like a leper. We stood there with our 5 kids and didn't know anybody, and heard people talking about going out to lunch together, etc. And my heart just longed for it. And yet I was really thankful, because I've talked to so many international students who have said, "Oh, we come to the States and people are so friendly," and they say, "Oh, we'd like to, you should come over sometime." And then, as is typical in Africa, they just show up at the front door. And it's not in our culture to do that. So people were shocked and put off, and the Africans felt it. We didn't really mean it. But I remember Joannie Metcalf, who made everybody feel like this was home. And the coffee was going and the fireplace was lit. And it didn't take very long before we were embraced and felt welcome. So we love you. We love this church. And I would plead that we lower the willingness to be hurt and to hurt each other over this name issue. We need God to name us. So that's my prayer.
Thank you. Let's take a pause for a minute and just listen for God's Spirit. All right. Well, we are right now at 8:29. John, do you want me to turn it back to you? If so, you need to unmute yourself.
I take it there's no more questions in the queue, Sarah? Or comments?
There is none that I see, not that there aren't comments, but no one has indicated that to me.
Great. Why don't we, there is another courtyard coming up in
Town hall, yep.
another town hall coming up. So if people, they can certainly join next time with other questions as well. So yes, let's wrap it up.
Okay.
I think there's a couple.
1 second to catch up with you.
Sure.
Do we know when the next town hall is?
He will. Oops.
Okay. Why don't you go to the next slide there, Sarah? Well, folks, first of all, thank you to everybody that's commented tonight, and the comments came from your hearts and they were listened to with hearts, and I just thank each of you for sharing what was on your heart. This we don't need to spend a lot of time on this slide, other than that for you to know that this slide can be found on the website under name change, and on the top line it has the remaining courtyard sessions. The next one being November 16th, and after that December 2nd, and then finally December 15th. And the next and last town hall meeting is on December 7th. I'd encourage each of you that has an interest to go online and look at the frequently asked questions under name change, and look at some of the commentaries from people who have requested to have their comments posted. And those will be up for a finite period of time over the next weeks. This will all culminate in a congregational vote on January 10th, 2021. I'm saying this, that this is the standing, that this is the specially called meeting, that appropriate notice has been given. I hear the comments about taking more time. Neither council nor the ministry team thinks that it's appropriate at this time to change off of that date. We will continue to listen to your comments and to hold them in our hearts. But for right now, you need to internalize the fact that this is the time when we'll have the first vote of two. The first vote being, should we change the name? And if so, then there will be a follow-up meeting after that, over the next, whether that would be in 2 months or 3 months or whatever, to decide on what a new name would be. So with that in mind, I'd like to close this in prayer and thank you again for your time with us tonight. Dear God, dear Jesus, dear Spirit, we need your wisdom as to how we can best serve you going forward. Please soften our hearts and sharpen our minds, and help us collectively to discern your will. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. And this will also be posted on our YouTube page. And so might you go in peace and in the love of Christ this night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.